Welcome to episode 4 of the Speak Easy podcast. I'm Prachi Sharma, your host for today. If you are someone waiting on that next opportunity, next job, next internship, navigating a pivot, or simply someone trying to figure things out, this episode is for you. Because you can see it, right? That next version of your life, that next step, you think and overthink about it. And that gap between who you are and who you are becoming, that space is real. You're sending application cold mails into the void and refreshing your inbox. You're watching people around you announce promotions, new roles, new cities, and you're smiling for them while quietly wondering, when will it be my turn? Am I already behind? But what if you're not stuck? What if you are just becoming? What if the small steps matter more than that perfect plan of yours? What if the struggle isn't the detour but the path itself? The path which you are treading through as one of the most important phase of your journey. You are in between. Today we unpack this in between. The phase where nothing feels certain, yet everything is shifting. We reframe it not as a waiting room, but the most defining stretch of your growth. To do this, I am joined by someone who has navigated some of the world's most complex transitions, from the boardroom to the classroom. I welcome Mr. Scott Beaumont, a British born global leader. As Google's former president for Asia Pacific, Mr. Scott has been at the forefront of region's digital transformation. As one of the many things that he's working right now, he is teaching leadership at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University of Singapore, with particular focus on building high performing teams of diverse talent. He is the ideal guest, the perfect voice for this conversation. Hello, Professor Scott.
Hello, Prachi. What a great initiative. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. And I know that you have maneuvered many in betweens with your vast experience and your amazing life. So tell us, what did your in between look like, and what can you tell our listeners today about maneuvering their in between?
Yes, so I've experienced the in between many times, and I guess that would be true of anyone with a long career. I mean, the first time that I would recall was after I'd started work in investment banking, straight out of college, university, into investment banking. It became clear to me at some stage that it wasn't going to be right for me long term. And I remember it being quite interesting trying to describe to people from outside that industry the skills that I had learned that they could apply and put to good use in the roles that they were looking for. And that was incredibly challenging and testing because I didn't know what the world of investment outside of investment banking looked like. And so I wasn't particularly effective or efficient at describing these skills. And it took, in the end, somebody to take a chance on me and what I might be able to achieve. And fortunately, I was enthusiastic. I had a huge work ethic. And some of the skills I had learned were applicable elsewhere. And so that first step beyond actually worked out pretty well. And that successful experiment, if you like, made subsequent periods of in between a little bit easier. The second one that comes to mind is when I stepped away from, again, another role in a large company to lead my own business, to actually create a company. And that was an interesting transition where my resolve was tested, and we struggled for funding, we struggled for revenue. I struggled to persuade people to join me at some times. Struggled to find investors, but actually, the skills that I learned, I wasn't necessarily going to learn in any other way than just throwing myself at the task and embracing the opportunity that I might fail, but using that fear of failure as a motivating factor to find the right answer and find the right answer quickly. So positive things came through that period of anxiety. Or the third time, for example, when I moved with my family to take on a role in China, the first time that I would work in Asia. And the company took a chance on me, and I took a chance on that role. But knowing that it was going to bring so many unknowns, and I would enjoy the experience of exploring those unknowns and learning from those unknowns and learning new skills, helped me overcome that fear of failure. And I also recognized that even if I were to fail, I would actually learn a lot in the process, which would then be of benefit when then looking and seeking something else. So, through many different step changes through the career, I've had many different in-between periods. They require a degree of courage and tenacity, but the step change in capability and confidence that comes from each of them is really remarkable.
Professor, you talked about three major in betweens for you, and those in betweens happened at very different life stages. How do you think the life stage that you were in also helped you or influenced your decisions, your feelings in your in betweens?
I've always been driven by curiosity. I've always been driven by learning new things and learning new skills. And I think that enthusiasm comes across. So I'm sure the fact that I'm willing to work hard was useful. But I think that desire and interest to explore new spaces, I can imagine when I sit down with people, that really comes across. And so that is helpful. I would say that also in these in-between spaces, having friends or sponsors or people on your side can be instrumental. And we may talk about that again, but both to give yourself confidence, but also sometimes to ensure that the door's open for you, not necessarily presenting an opportunity to you on a plate, but at least helping open the door so you've got the opportunity to share your vision or share your credentials for that position. So I think it would be unfair if I look back on this retrospective and shine a light on these transitions I made and make them seem very smooth and very and happen naturally because of my own capability. The truth is, at the time, it was quite bumpy, and certainly seemed very large in the moment, although less when I look back on them over time. And in all cases were aided either by a sponsor leaning in to help provide that opportunity to me, or a sponsor leaning in to give me the confidence that I was on the right track.
So, we have talked about creating a tribe around us, the people around us. We have the opportunities. But then comes the fear of failure. What about that, Professor?
Well, you can't maximize your potential without failure, which might sound oversimplistic, but if you think about it, it's literally true. Everything you might have tried, if you got it right first time, it was a fluke. Even as you think about science and exploration, quite often the scientific method is ruling out mistake by mistake and getting closer and closer to the theory which is the truth. And so as you go through a career, you should make mistakes. You should try and make sure they're not silly mistakes. You should try and make sure that the downsides are limited, but making mistakes is part of the learning process and part of growing. Somehow then you need to develop a courage or a confidence that allows you to put one foot in front of the other, even if you're not sure what's in front of you. I often think about this mental scale. There's a dial between 0 and 10, where 0 is no confidence at all and 10 is overwhelming arrogance. And with no confidence at all, you won't have the courage to take a step forward. But with 10 confidence, actually you won't look to take a step forward because you won't believe there's anything to learn. And so the place that we're trying to exist in is in the middle, where that anxiety that we don't know everything is actually fuel for the energy that gets us to take action, takes us into a place of learning and development that builds our skills and builds our capabilities going forward. And sometimes that's easier to channel than others. I remember very clearly, as if it were yesterday, exactly the street corner I was stood on after another really bad meeting with a venture capital company in London with my co-founder, trying to get funding for our new business, trying to get it off the ground. And we just looked at each other and wondered whether it was going to be worth the effort, whether we were actually going to get the funding we needed to bring this dream to life, and wondering whether we should just throw in the towel and go back to more understandable, conventional jobs rather than this journey that we'd embarked on. And somehow between us, actually finding the resolve and finding the courage to move on the basis that we believed we had something there. We believed in what we were trying to do. We believed that we would learn a lot along the way, and that it was worth the anxiety and worth the effort. And so I think for all of us, as we look to embrace and do something new, as we embrace these transition points, it's a matter of finding that balance between not enough confidence and too much confidence, but also finding the resolve that gets us to engage even if we know that failure is one potential outcome.
And this is exactly I wanted to ask you about, because I am a student who ventured into academics after 10 years of experience. I'm a student right now at the Kuan School of Public Policy, and I see my peers who have 1 or 2 years of professional experience, me myself with 10 years of experience, some are with 5 to 6 years of experience, and everybody has the same question: where will we be? What are the practical actions that we can take, or anybody who is listening can take, while becoming in this in-between phase?
So one of the things I think people sometimes get caught up with is trying to do what's expected of them rather than necessarily what they might actually prefer to do. And it's easily done because you go through school, you go through university, you start working, and you get recognition, external recognition, either your exam grades, or you get a promotion, or you get a pay rise. And somewhere along the line, we forget to remember actually that there's an internal reason that we're doing what we're doing. And some of that may be that recognition. That's fine. But different people, or the same person at different stages during their life, me, for example, there were different phases of my life where I wanted different things. And those different things would then quite often influence the work that I wanted to be doing or how I wanted to dedicate myself to my work. There was a period in my career for sure where I had no interest at all in leading other people. None. And yet it's turned out to be one of the most fulfilling things that I've ever worked on, and something that I'm very passionate about investing in going forward. It certainly wasn't true of the 25-year-old me. So your view of what's important might change, but having a view of what's important at any given moment, I think is quite significant in centering you in terms of what it is you want to be looking at, and would make you much more convincing when you sit down opposite somebody for an interview that actually what you're proposing and what you're offering is centered, and you're committed to it, and that commitment shows because you wouldn't be there otherwise. Now, it's a competitive market. It's a competitive job market. You might end up taking a role at some particular stage which is not a perfect match, and that's okay. But at least if you're aware what it is that's important to you, you're able to subtly navigate towards those spaces that match those requirements. And sometimes I find that people are focused on either too narrow a focus, or focused on what they think others think they should be focusing on, or focusing on what looks new and shiny rather than necessarily what matters most to them. So I think that grounding first and foremost is useful. Then I think from conversations I have around the region with different teams and different people at different levels, I find that sometimes people aren't necessarily well practiced in talking effectively about the skills they do have, or how those skills translate to the role or the opportunity that they're talking to. And I think this is easily done, and it's not, I mean, I guess it is an implied criticism, but it's understandable. I'm empathetic to it. If you've worked, let's go back to my background. I worked very hard in investment banking for a long time. My work ethic was enormous. I did learn a lot from that role. But it was very difficult, not having done something else, to explain why what I had been good at would apply in the new industries that I was looking to engage in. But you need to be able to do that in order to give confidence to the potential employer or the potential team member or the potential boss that actually what you have is going to make sense in the context that we're now speaking about. So try and be grounded and aim for things which are on your path, because I think you'll show more commitment, more enthusiasm, and more light in the interview when you're speaking to somebody. But also think about how you might abstract your skills and apply them to the new context, because that will make that conversation richer and much more relatable or interesting for the other party to be able to imagine you in the role, doing the role that they're offering.
You talked about talking to people around and showcasing your skills. I have found that what are the actions that we take daily in terms of the actions that we are also putting in the back burner proves to be the most path breaking task to do. For example, I was procrastinating to that one mail that I needed to do to one professor for days because I thought I am not ready. That limitation, self limiting beliefs that come around. And when I send that very rough draft that I thought is very rough, he said, let's work around it. And I got the biggest opportunity of writing my international case study. I think it happens with many of us that we think that we are not enough, and we procrastinate talking to the right people. The self limiting beliefs that we have in this stage is something. Can you guide us about or talk about?
So what can you do practically? Because you're right, quite often I would open up a role and I would have 2 or 3 people in mind that could do this role and do it very well. And I would often be surprised that these people would not apply. And when I would challenge them on it, they would say that they looked at the role and they thought, well, actually, 70% of that role I can do exceptionally, but 30% actually would be new to me. And so I'm probably not the best person for the role. Whereas I saw, it was very easy for me to imagine the potential and imagine growing into that role and doing it well. So how do you as that individual get over that hump? Maybe part of it might be finding people that are on your side, developing a team of supporters. This might be your best friend. It might be a colleague in your team. It might be a fellow student in the classroom. It might be a former boss. It might be your parents. People that you can trust that will challenge you if you're being far-fetched, but it's much more likely will encourage you because they can see your commitment, your enthusiasm, your talent, your skills, maybe through a clearer lens than you see them yourselves. So that may be one way of doing it. Another way would be to work on your own process and your own discipline. That's harder. And perhaps it comes a little bit with experience. And once you've done it once, and perhaps you do it in a smaller way first, perhaps you get more comfortable then doing it in future. The reality is, for everybody, we will not go through life without failing. Because, well, the first time we didn't walk, we fell over. And so there you go. The way that we learn is to try and to fail and to try again. Whether it's learning to walk or riding a bike, it takes us time. And then once we've learned how to do it, we can do it. We don't even think about it. It becomes an unconscious thought. And so, are there smaller steps that you can do? rather than this gargantuan thing that's big in your mind, which is actually I'm going to make a step change now, and actually I'm very fearful about it, which is normal, but actually I'm not going to do it because it's too big a leap. The smaller steps that I took earlier on in my career meant that when it came to imagining what life might be like and what the work might be like and how my family might adjust and how I might adjust to living and working in China after a career in Europe, was made easier by the fact that it wasn't the first time I was trying to do something like that, and previous smaller steps had kind of paved the way and given me confidence, not so much that I was going to succeed, but more that the safety net wouldn't let me fall too far. And by taking those earlier baby steps, it made it easier then to do it at a later stage. So some of it, going back to your original question, I think work on a support team, a support network. And then secondly, perhaps experiment in smaller ways, so that you get comfortable with the idea that you might fail. It might not work, but actually that's part of learning. And the more you do it, the less terrifying it will seem when it actually matters.
Professor, now I want to talk about this information overload age, especially with the age of this AI revolution in which we are, the real culture where our focus span is so little. We always used to say sharing is caring, but today we share more over social media than care for ourselves in the real life. We need something that grounds us, runs our creative juices, apart from all the hustle and bustle that we are doing. Something like hobbies.
So, what do you think that these hobbies, the self caring mechanisms, are more necessary in this phase of in between?
I mean, particularly in the space in between, I think what you're looking for is resilience, and you're looking for energy, and you're looking to make sure that you can channel your determination, and you're looking to manage your stress. And hobbies are part of that answer. I think reflection is a superpower, and I think rest is severely underrated. So let me just reflect on those three things. So let's talk about rest. I remember meeting a lady many years ago now who had been coaching some MBA teams and women's MBA teams in the US. And she said, the struggle I have with you executives is that you think that sleep is optional. It's something that you fit in around all the work that you're doing. I'm coaching world-class athletes and they're sleeping 12 hours a day. And I think their answer is closer to the right answer rather than what you're doing. They are expected to perform at the highest level. And rest and recovery is part of making sure that when the moment counts and when it really matters, they're able to deliver their best. And my fear is that's not true of all of you because you are not prioritizing rest in the same way. But high performance is still expected. And I thought that was fascinating. And ever since then, I've been very mindful, both in the interest of my own health and own performance, but also of that of my teams, to try and encourage people to make sure that they find enough recovery time. The second thing is reflection. And it links to me for hobbies, which is why it occurs to me, because I actually run, and we'll talk about that. But I use my running time often as reflection time. What happened today? Why didn't that meeting go quite so well? Why didn't that conversation go quite so well? How did I not convey my point of view correctly? Why did I create confusion in that meeting? What could I have done better? Ways of kind of reflecting on the day and kind of, mentally going through my notes and thinking about things that, I could have done better or went very well, so I'd want to do again, or a reminder or a conversation that I wanted to follow up with somebody. So those moments of reflection, just to kind of tidy the desk, are really helpful, and I used to do that daily. And the reason why it worked for me daily was because I would sleep better. And if I didn't do it, my brain would wake me up in order to remind me that I hadn't made a note of this or that, or I hadn't decided what to do next on this. So that was actually part of my process towards better recovery too. But the reflection, I think, also just helped me. It was a process that helped me be better over time with a number of small, easy learnings that compounded rather than needed to be bigger things further on down the line. And hobbies, and for me that includes running. Hobbies are there basically to ideally allow you to disconnect. Again, going back to that MBA coach, allow you to kind of find a space where your brain doesn't need to be locked on and working at 90 miles an hour on a particular work topic, because there are other things too in your life. There are friends, there's family, there'll be other things that will make your life richer, more than just what you're doing day to day, at least for large parts of your life. There may be moments in your career where either the work is very intense or super rewarding, where actually that's all you need. That is all the fuel you need. Fantastic. But that's not going to be the story all the time. And so having hobbies that help build social networks or help you on your recovery or help you create a little bit of distance or help you find that reflection time or help keep you fit to support your performance, or teach you the value of teamwork or teach you that losing is just part of life. These are all the reasons why I think team sports are quite useful with school, for example. Rest, reflection, and hobbies, as you mentioned, I think are three ingredients in the overall recipe for success. Well, let me give you another example. You're speaking about this in-between phase, and
Yes.
this in-between phase can be an anxious time.
And lonely time.
Yeah, to both, right? So, as you just said, with the hobbies as a way of creating community, there's a tick there. But I reflect back on my role in China at the time. Terrifically difficult at times, right? Intense new learning and unlearning experience, where at times I wondered whether we were making any progress at all or whether or not I would be able to make it work. And my running at the time, I remember training for a particular event and the satisfaction that I got from applying myself to a task and over many months seeing the progress such that I could do something at the end of it that I didn't know that I could do. And I was able to relate that back and take confidence from it back to my work. If I apply myself to something, if I train properly, if I get the right advice, if I show the right determination and the right commitment, I can actually get to things and outcomes that I didn't know I could do. And it was a way of showing that actually I did have the mettle, I did have the skills to do what it took. And I took from my hobby confidence that I was actually able then to bring into day-to-day life. So similarly, when you're in this period of transition, do I have the determination to persist? Do I have the ability to meet with new people and relate to new people and strike up new relationships? Do I have the ability to learn new skills? And actually, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And those things apply as well here as they do in what I'm going to try and do professionally next or academically next. And so, it should be good for the confidence and, give you some good evidence that there's reason for that confidence.
And now we come to our last segment where we want to know very quick things from you. So, what was your most significant in-between phase?
I think probably, I had several, which is why I'm hesitating. And the interesting thing is they all felt big at the time and they all felt less big in hindsight. So there's one key takeaway we've not spoken about. Something that looks terrifying in the moment, you'll look back on in a few months' time and it will not seem quite as terrifying because eventually what it comes down to is putting one foot in front of the other, and we can all do that. So I guess the first transition would have been the most challenging because it was the first.
How
And
old were you?
early 20s.
Wow.
Early 20s. And yeah, I remember speaking to friends of mine saying, this dates me, but you'll get an idea. So talking about how you were going to be able to find information on your mobile phone. You'll be looking up the sports scores and the daily news and the weather on your phone. And you're going to go to work for a company that does that. And you were doing this before. Are you mad? Probably yes. But, that was at the beginning of, a technology industry and a technology revolution that we're still experiencing today. I've never looked back and regretted that decision. But at the time, I didn't feel it was particularly bold nor brave, or at least that's what my memory tells me. But I remember friends at the time being very incredulous. But having embraced that uncertainty, it made it easier then in subsequent moments to embrace further uncertainty, because it worked out okay so far. And actually, if I fail this time, I've got less far to fall because I've got more skills than I had the last time I made that decision. So I guess the first one was the most significant.
Next question. Don't you look at us now, your mentees, the teams that you mentor? You can do it. What is one thought that comes in your mind which you can't say to them, but you said, like, hey, you will be fine?
I think I would just say persist. You're all so capable, and many of you that I've met through the Lee Kuan Yew School, you've made a very deliberate decision coming to Singapore and taking the Masters as a way of learning and building your knowledge and building your networks and creating more choice and opportunity going forward. You've already navigated a period of in-between by embracing the opportunity to take your Masters. You've done it once. Even if you hadn't done it before, you've done it once. And so going forward, carry that confidence, carry that awareness that, okay, this is another period, but I've done it before. And it worked out for me before. That was the right decision. I've taken a lot from it. So doing it again, I'm going to, find something, and actually I'm going to be able to use that something to build and further my skills too. And I can do it because I've already done it. And I think just reminding yourselves that you've earned the right to be confident. You'll need to be resilient. You're going to get a lot of no's. You're going to need a lot of conversations. You're going to write a lot of cover letters and polish your CVs and a lot of interviews. It's competitive, but you've navigated it once. So carry that confidence with you as you navigate it again.
So ask for advice. Don't be afraid to ask, just like I asked you to be on this podcast.
No, that's right. If you ask for sponsorship or mentorship or help or coaching or a favour or whatever it happens to be, the worst that can happen is somebody says no. The worst that can happen is somebody says no and doesn't give you any context as to why they've said no. And that will feel tough in the moment. More ordinarily, if somebody says no, they've got a reason, and if they give you that reason, even with the no, you've learnt something. But more ordinarily, I think people are generally good to each other. And you'll find even just asking the question leads to an outcome perhaps that may not be the ideal outcome that you were looking for, but is another step or two on the path that you're walking.
So take the most scary action that you can, because don't think about the worst case scenario, but can we also think about the best case scenario? And that's the most reflective and precious takeaway from this podcast. You have done it. You have come so far. You will do it again. So do not fear this uncertainty, because that's what Dr. Maya Angelou says, who inspires me every day, that I had rainbow in my skies. I am going in another room and I take the blessings, the well wishes of everyone that believed in me, that chose me. So today I choose myself. Are you going to choose yourself? Thank you so much, Professor, for this conversation that we had today. And I would like to invite my viewers and all listeners as to say that what is something that you want to tell yourself? Maybe you can write a post-it, stick it on your laptop or your mirror saying, I'm still moving. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for listening to the Speakeasy podcast. We will meet you again in the next episode. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor.
Thanks, Prachi.